Firstly, I'm Jacinta Redden, Chief Executive of Advanced Cairns. Really pleased to be joined by my partner in crime.
Hey, everybody.
Everybody knows Mark Olsen, TT and Q. It's a very scary thing to be sharing a stage with Mark, as you all know. He's a fantastic presenter.
Promise to be nice. That's right. Only way to go.
So we wanted to ask you both, and given, Jeremy, that you finished, we'll start with you and then we will alternate our questions. We will also make sure that we cut back on the waffle, right, Mark? So between us, we'll keep you in track. We wanted to ask you about leadership. You're both asking us to put our faith in you to be the next member for Leichhardt. So tell me what leadership means to you and who is a leader you admire?
I think I've been in a job that requires leadership for the last 15 years. You go to some very demanding situations, and not every situation you've been to before, and you have to think on your feet and lead the team. And I think that the big trick with it is definitely taking the team with you. Don't throw them under the bus, lead from the front and lead by example. And I think that's been a big part of my career with the ambulance service, is making sure that you take those values to every job that you do across Far North Queensland. When you talk about a leader that really resonates with me, obviously I look back to Winston Churchill. I love him so much, and I named my third son after him. And just, you look at the situation.
Your son's called Winston?
My youngest son is called Winston. There you go. And you look back at the challenges that we faced in the late 30s, early 40s, and it would have been easy to roll over and just accept the outcome that looked like the inevitable in Europe. But he fought and he fought and he fought. And today I think we're better off because of that.
Matt, leadership and who you most admire?
Leadership is really about inspiring the change that not just you need to see, but everybody else wants to see as well. So to be a part of that, a good leader is consultative, understands the who, the what, the where, and can adjust their leadership styles depending on who and where they're speaking to. Sport being the obvious example for me as a background, 12 guys in a team, 12 different personalities. Some people like to be ridden hard. Some people need to be built up. Some people need to be showed the way. It all depends on what's going to work, and that's going to be different for different areas of Cairns, different areas of the Cape. Not everyone's going to respond to the same thing, the same way. So you need to be able to create that relationship, understand who you're working with, and understand what their goals are. Because without understanding what everybody's outcomes is, the best outcome for everybody, it doesn't matter. If you can't bring everyone with you, you end up out there by yourself. And
your leader that you most admire?
Oh, look, probably most recently, the hope that Obama inspired in the United States. I guess the pure joy that came out from a country that did have slavery to have a black man elected as president, the power of his oration was very much inspirational, and I think he became a leader that the world looked to for hope. And hope is one of the most important things that you can have, and he certainly delivered.
Fantastic. Thank you, Matt. Starting with you, Matt, and then on to Jeremy. So the election is won and done. It's May, and we want to know from you how you're going to fight for the seat of Leichhardt, and what are your first most important priorities? What does your first 100 days look like? Matt first, and then Jeremy.
Buy a jacket.
Yes, you've got a jacket.
I've got one jacket. I have one jacket. Look, the first thing that I'm going to do, and I've made the commitment to the discrete communities and the communities up the Cape, is head up there. You know, the nature of the campaign means we do spend more time in Cairns and less time in the Cape and the Torres Strait, although I recently returned from the Torres Strait and I'm headed up to Weipa tomorrow, but I'm going to go take the time to visit every single one of those communities and sit down and get a better understanding of where they are and where they want to go. That's the important listening part of it. After that, we start needing to have those discussions here in Cairns with the leaders of business, the Chamber, Advanced Cairns, and start getting a roadmap for everybody. To a certain extent, what I want doesn't matter. It's what this city requires and needs. And the people who in this room are the experts in that. And the experts will help us guide us. We're here, we want to go to here. This part is my job. I will get us there, but if we can articulate where it is we want to go.
Thanks, Matt. Jeremy?
I think my priority in the first 100 days would be to keep up the energy. We have a huge change ahead of us to get Australia back on track. And there's some policies that we obviously want to push forward in the first sitting of Parliament around cost of living, around guaranteeing healthcare and around our crime that we're really pushing. So they are obviously our focuses, because when I door knock around the community, they are the two issues, the crime and cost of living, that people want to see fixed. When they go to the grocery store, they notice that it's costing a fortune. You know, it's over $50 for a bag of groceries now, and fuel is just creeping up to that $2 a litre mark again. So I think I'll put some runs on the board by really focusing on those two topics and getting some help for Cairns.
And staying with that idea, let's imagine a scenario where you're actually in opposition, that it's the opposite party is actually in Canberra. Sticking with you now, Jeremy, how might you behave differently as the member for Leichhardt in opposition?
Yeah, well, that's a realistic situation that we need to contemplate, and I am happy to work with any side to make sure that the Far North is represented. Obviously, I wear blue as my colour, and I would love to see a Peter Dutton-led government. But I think through my work as that paramedic for so long, it shows that you could work with all demographics, all walks of life, and making sure that their voice gets heard.
Matt?
Well, we hope that doesn't happen, but that's okay. Look, I think you've got to advocate for the things still that you took to the election. You know, things like making sure that the reef remains protected, that it becomes our number one priority, that our tourism industry receives the support that it so richly deserves, which there's yet to be an announcement on from the LNP, that I am still and always available to the electorate and to our constituents. The job isn't just advocating for policy, it's helping people work their way through Centrelink, work their way through Medicare, work their way through the Department of Veterans Affairs, to make sure that everyone understands that my door remains open, that I remain the advocate that they voted in, and that I will continue to fight hard for the region, for the things that I believe in, and hold the LNP to account for the things that they have promised to ensure that we get all that we deserve.
Thank you. We're going to move now to more policy issues, but I do want to thank all of you in the audience who did contribute questions in advance. These are informing the questions that Mark and I are putting, and I do put you on notice that we are inviting questions from the audience. This is your really good opportunity to be able to ask Jeremy and Matt those questions from the floor. So please, we look forward to turning to you for that. But wanted to turn now to housing. We saw sugar hits left, right and centre on the weekend from both parties at the campaign launches. But rather than delve into the actual policy announcements themselves, do you think about the fact that we have, and actually Nick referenced a falling birth rate in his opening, we have a falling birth rate, a declining population, all of these incentives and initiatives being given to millennials to buy their first home are going to be facing retirement with a far smaller tax base. Are we at risk of kicking the can down the road yet again and making it even more difficult in the next 30, 40 years? Is what got us here, this problem about the lack of housing, going to actually enable this generation to actually have a secure retirement? So sticking with you, Matt.
The LNP likes to pretend that the housing crisis has shown up overnight. This has been brewing along for quite a long time. And that's why the announcements made by Anthony Albanese on the weekend are so important. Firstly, it's 100,000 homes that are quarantined specifically for first home buyers, to give young people that security, the privacy, if we want to get the birth rate up a little bit, that is afforded to you in your own home. And on top of that, the reduction of the deposit. A 5% deposit, so if the average new house in Cairns costs you $500,000, the 5% deposit is about $20,000. You save $23,000 a year on mortgage insurance. That is a much more achievable goal and will encourage new houses, new people in there. What it doesn't do is raise your super. The LNP's position is to use your own super, which, as you pointed out, Jacinta, is meant for retirement. It also places a bet that your house will go up at a higher level than your super would go up, otherwise you would drop behind. So what you've basically done then is inflate the market. You've taken a blowtorch to something that's already hot and heated it up further. The only option that deals with the supply as well as the demand is the one presented by Anthony Albanese. Any economist will tell you, if you just heat up demand, you get an inflationary problem. You need the supply. And that's why those 100,000 houses quarantined for first home buyers, not for investors, first home buyers is the most important piece of that puzzle. Add in fee-free TAFE and you've got all of a sudden a whole bunch of new tradies out there, the carpenters who need to build it, the sparkies who need to wire it, and the plumbers who need to get things together. It is a whole of economy response to create a whole economy solution, because a declining base birth rate is not a good thing.
Thanks, Matt. Jeremy, really keen to hear from you.
Yeah, well, I read the article this morning about the declining birth rate, and it put a lot of emphasis on the increased cost of living, and people just can't afford to start families anymore. And that's also included with the housing. So we know that in Cairns, the first houses that people would have been buying 5 years ago were priced under $400,000, and now they're at that $500,000 mark. So we need to obviously support our councils. They've got a really good plan put forward at the moment, and we're working through that with them. I had Angus Taylor come and meet with the CEO only a couple of weeks ago. But also to put that little bit of a sugar hit on it, we also need to realign our migration. We've had over 1 million people migrate to Australia in the last 2 years, and we built under 400,000 homes in that time. So that just doesn't add up, especially when people coming out of those lockdown years are trying to find more privacy and bigger houses with bigger yards.
So sticking with you, referenced the Cairns Regional Council's request for funding to support the expansion into Mount Peter, and it's quite a complex planning issue. We won't go into it now, but I'm going to ask you both, and sticking with you, Jeremy, will you support the $150 million towards ensuring that area of Mount Peter to our south is going to be unlocked and enable Cairns to grow into the future?
Well, I won't be making any commitments today on the 150. The total package is about $450 million, and they estimate it'll bring around 18,000 homes onto the market. We obviously sat down with Angus Taylor and we said, can we break this down into stages? And our biggest one is, what's the government input per house output? We need to make sure that those numbers line up, but we are making some very positive steps towards that, and we'll be helping to support as much as we can.
Matt, I'm going to come back to a conversation that Jeremy just started there, flipping the script a little bit, Jacinta, around immigration. So this is a topic that's been talked about a lot, but you're in a community that relies very heavily on a workforce that travels through. The building we're in at the moment relies on a workforce that transits through Australia. We have a designated area migration agreement thanks to the hard work of the Chamber of Commerce. Matt, what's your position on immigration? How are we going to find the balance between future housing and future immigration? And then Jeremy, the same.
So the Anthony Albanese Labor government put forward a policy to cap migration that was going to work into the cities while allowing regional areas to continue at a level of migration that was required to staff and continue to run small, medium-sized business with skilled workers and support our regional universities. This plan was supported by both CQU and JCU, and the Liberals voted against it and are now trying to talk tough on immigration. Cairns is in a position where we do not have enough skilled labour. It is patently apparent everywhere we go, and we noticed it particularly during COVID. We are dependent on migration to function. If this migration is cut too much, then the economy of Cairns gets its knees cut out from underneath it. Research has said that, while those numbers sound large and impressive, we haven't quite got back to the pre-COVID levels of population yet. We have a declining birth rate. We do need more people. If you have a birth rate below 2, you don't actually have a growing population. It's declining. It needs to be like 2.2 or 2.1 to actually ensure stability. We're going backwards. And if we continue to go backwards, we're going to continue to find these work shortages. So just blanketly saying no migration, and I mean, it's an easy thing to do, and it's probably a populist thing to do. And we've seen this play, I guess, in other parts of the world. But Cairns is dependent on migration, and I'm not here to see the legs cut out of our tourism industry, our hospitality industry, and importantly, our medical community.
Jeremy?
Yeah, well, that's obviously not quite correct. We are very openly in support of Dharma. I believe that the Chamber of Commerce does roll that out quite well. And when I sat down with Trish and we talked about Dharma, I said, how many people have you actually turned back? And she said quite a few, and made a few examples of people that were trying to cheat the system. So we're very supportive of that. We're also very supportive of the working holiday visas coming through, and we are very supportive of those second and third year extensions on it to make sure that we have got fruit pickers, we have got people in cafes, and we have got people pouring beers behind the bars. They're the traditional jobs that we're struggling to get Aussies to do at the moment.
So who are you going to cut?
So we've obviously we've agreed to 25% reduction in that. You were saying before that we were going to cut all of it.
Who though? Skilled migration? Is that because that's what's left? You've just taken our doctors and nurses, podiatrists, allied health out of the mix. So it's not enough to say.
Thank you. Jeremy, please answer. Yeah.
No, we've just made an announcement before about increasing over 200 extra Aussie kids to go to university to become medical students in regional universities that are allocated towards regional areas. So, we don't just need to import everybody, we can also grow our own here locally.
And we might stick with that theme of immigration, and you've mentioned the universities. International students are really critical to fund our entire university system. Without international students, we wouldn't be able to operate. Here, of course, JCU, we've been partnering very closely with to advocate for additional Commonwealth-supported places through the medical school. We know that when doctors are trained in region, they stay in region, and there's a nationwide shortage of GPs in rural and remote areas, but particularly here in Cairns and in the Far North. So will we get a commitment from you for additional CSP places right here at JCU Cairns?
We stood up before and talked about our commitment to regional health, and we announced today that $5 million goes to the Regional Health Commissioner to allocate out $100 million worth of Commonwealth supported places and infrastructure investments towards universities that excel in pushing out rural doctors essentially. JCU has a really good track record. The national average for doctor graduates coming out and going into general practice is only 15%. JCU locally between here and Townsville puts out 50%. So as far as I'm concerned, they're sitting very, very, I would say, top of that pile to get their hands on some of that money, and I'll be making sure that they are reviewed very closely so we can get those positions here.
Matt.
So in the budget, Mark Butler has 400 CSP places being rolled out. 400's a bigger number than 200. And look, it's my job to work with JCU to ensure that those roles are here. There was already 20 CSP places placed into JCU upon the election of the Anthony Albanese government. So that's 20 people that are learning to be doctors right now. The problem with training GPs is that it takes a while. From go to woe, it's 10 to 15 years. So we aren't actually going to see these doctors hit the ground running till 2030, 2035. It's going to take some time. And that's why skilled migration remains a key part of this. And it's why Mark Butler has worked with some of the visa and regulations around ensuring that we can bring in doctors from countries with like-for-like medical systems, for example, the UK, Canada, New Zealand, because while additional CSP places are fantastic and they are part of the longer-term solution, they're not going to fix the problem right now. We have a problem that is a decade behind, and we need to do something. And at this point, it's bringing these doctors in. And if you're going to cut migration by 25%, some of the people that you cut are going to be doctors.
So Matt, changing tack a little bit, let's talk about the environment, something dear to us all. It's our greatest asset, and for many of us, it's also one of our greatest challenges. Starting with you, Matt, we've seen extreme weather events increase. We've seen more frequent cyclones, more severe flooding. Coming into government, if you were successful, what specific policies are you bringing to the table, not only to ameliorate some of those, but how do you ensure that this community is both resilient and can have a rapid recovery from increasing climate pressure? And specifically, I'm keen to know your personal view on climate change and whether it is human-induced or whether it is part of the bigger cycle. So let's hear your view on climate change and your policies to address not only the physical effects, but also the reputational damage to the Great Barrier Reef from coral bleaching.
Climate change is a direct result of human intervention. This is not a disputable fact anymore. And I'm sorry if that upsets people, but this is where we're at. The reef, as we know, needs two things moving forward. The first is real action on climate change. This is why net zero is so important. This is why the targets are so important. This is why the legislation is so important. Once we decided that net zero was going to be a thing for Australia, the European tourists started coming back because they understood that we were serious about protecting our reef. Now, as you mentioned, Mark, climate change is upon us. We are getting those extreme weather events. We're getting increasing amount of bleaching, so we have to build the resilience of the reef. And that's actually a multi-pronged thing. Part of it is the Trippy program, which I know Nita is so proud of, which involves getting rid of the crown of thorns starfish, the Tropicalia, the bad snail.
Trapella, yep.
Yep. Ensuring that the runoff from the farms is okay. We've also developed a way of making yield for sugarcane farmers better while reducing the impact of their runoff, which is a win-win for our sugarcane farmers who've done so much for the region over so years, and it's a win for the reef. The thing that it does that we also very important is that push to renewables. We are in an area, even within Leichhardt, where the impacts of climate change have not just a tourism, but an existential threat to the people of the Torres Strait. Masig, the bodies of the children in the cemetery are being washed out to sea. We've invested $70 million in seawalls for that. If you are a people of the ocean, which the Torres Strait Islander community is, and the ocean becomes a threat, as Richard Miles says, what do you think that does to you psychologically? That is a very, very real problem. We need to be a shining light in the far north because we are so dependent upon our nature and upon our reef for our economic development. And this is why nuclear is such a threat. Nuclear not only will take 25 years to happen, it will also add an extra 2 billion tonnes of carbon into the atmosphere. And that is a reputational threat. And on reputational threats, Jeremy, you mentioned last week, unprompted, that you were looking at places for the storage of radioactive waste. And it doesn't matter whether that's an actual thing or not. The fact is, it was said and it was reported on. Should you get into this position, the first thing that's going to happen is someone's going to Google that, and the conversation all around the world will be, should we go to the Cape? Oh no, that's where they sell radioactive waste. Should we go to the Daintree? Oh no, that's where they send radioactive.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Let's give Jeremy the opportunity to respond.
Well, thanks for bringing up all those environment programs, because I believe all of them were funded under the LNP and started by the LNP. So the Crown of Thorns and the seawalls, thank you very much, Warren, over there. When you talk about the nuclear waste, there is not going to be a nuclear dump in Queensland.
So why did you say it?
You let me finish, thank you, Matt. There's not going to be a nuclear dump in Queensland. We're very committed to our reef, obviously. I personally believe that the climate is changing. You'd be silly not to believe in that. And I believe the answer is helping with our tourist operators. So we need to make sure people can come to the reef and advocate for it. They pay a reef levy that goes back into it. I went out to the reef only a couple of days ago with our marine-based tourist operators. I met with the airport about making sure we get more planes in, and I've also sat down with TTNQ to work through a plan so we can make sure that the tourists are attracted in.
Thank you, Jeremy. I just might come back to that second question, Mark. I think it was not, do you agree that the climate is changing, but do you agree that it's changing as a result of human activity?
Oh, humans are definitely playing a part in that, obviously, yes.
So sticking with that theme, the impact on insurance, of course, is enormous. And we know that Warren's done a lot of work around, and Nita, around the reinsurance pool and establishing that. The problem is becoming more and more complex and challenging as there are more extreme weather events, and we only need to look this year at what's happened. What policies do you have in mind? What would you do to try and address the increasing costs of insurance?
Starting with the reinsurance pool that has been fought for many, many years, and there's a Senate inquiry that just went through recently, or Senate submissions, that wants to expand that. They made a recommendation around marine vessels and marine assets, which I fully support and hope that we could get that across the line. Obviously, with any program that's government related, it starts out as a great idea, and we have to build on it and build on it and build on it. So I'm happy to look at all options on the table. We need to look across the ditch at what the Kiwis are doing with their earthquake programs, and make sure we can bring all the good stuff in and use that money wisely.
Thank you. Matt?
So the reinsurance pool was a fantastic idea, and the intentions were great. It was meant to deliver a 46% reduction in insurance and didn't quite get there. And the reductions that it did produce, obviously, the cost increases took that out of the equation anyway. There is, as Jeremy mentioned, that review that has been looked at by both sides of Parliament, and we'll have to wait to see what that says and the recommendations that come from that to see where we go moving that forwards. But a lot of it becomes around, and I said this at the Chamber, right, around the resiliency of the homes that we build, where we build them, and the information that we have. So there's been grant funding already for, the better doors, better windows that stop inundation. $2.8 million to the Cairns Regional Council for flood mapping, so we better understand the flow of the water. That's really important, because if you door knock around the town, there'll be people saying, well, I'm paying insurance because they say I'm in a flood zone. There's no flood zone there anymore. The river has diverted, the river has become a storm drain, the river has disappeared completely. So there is not necessarily an understanding from insurance companies about what we are looking at anymore. And so they're using old data to create a policy which is no longer fit for purpose. So increased data, better data to understand where water is going, specifically water in this case, but in other areas it'll be, fire, things of that nature, is going to be the key to lowering the risk profile and therefore lowering the cost of insurance.
So we're going to come to the floor in just a moment. Got a few more questions for these guys, and then they'll be wandering around with the microphone. So get your questions ready. But Matt, I wanted to come back to you. Neither yourself or Jeremy have run small businesses or major businesses, but there's an entire business community here in the room that wants to know how you're going to represent the interests of the business community here in Leichhardt. It's a large electorate, it's a very diverse electorate, and also a really enterprising entrepreneurial electorate. How do you represent them, and how are you going to make sure you understand what industry needs over such a big area? And then Jeremy, to you.
I do not run a small business, but the Taipans were certainly a small business and still are, so I have exposure through that. And my partner runs a triathlon business, so I get an idea from her about the various challenges that pop up. Small business is an integral part of the way Cairns is set up in terms of the way it operates as a society. If I go to the football, went to watch my Lions play on the weekend, all over the scoreboard, it's Wilmot, it's a different moving company. Small business keeps our sporting clubs alive, it keeps all of our community events going. It is an incredibly important part of this region. I think that my conversations with Trish, particularly around the Dharma, have proved that I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to act. Julian Hill and I sat down with Trish. She went over why the Dharma was important, why it couldn't be an election thing, why it had to happen now to give that surety to small business in Cairns. And Tony Burke was up here within 6 weeks to announce it. That was on the back of Trish. It was on the back of her reaching out. It was on the back of me taking the time to listen and learn. And this is something that I would commit to everybody. Like, you've got an idea, bring it to us. Let's get this done together. It's never going to be me versus you, or it's always has to be us. And I congratulate, Advanced Cairns for the application, the Chamber for because you are keeping these businesses front of mind all the time, and that's really important.
Thanks, Matt. Jeremy?
So anyone that runs a small business obviously knows that the last 3 years have been really rough. The cost of energy has gone up, the cost of staff has gone up. When you can find a staff member, they can't get a house. So we're obviously very, very forward with our wishes for small business. We have committed a $30,000 small business instant asset write-off. The current program at the moment is $20,000. Labor's extended it for another year, and then they're going to pull it back to $1,000. We want $30,000 in perpetuity going forward. We've obviously committed to helping a lot of apprentices come on with the $12,000 wage subsidy for small and medium businesses, so you could train our next generation of staff coming through. We've obviously got a really strong energy policy that will help lower the cost of energy in your business, and the 25 cents per reduction in fuel is not just on mums and dads' cars, it's also on the trucks that bring goods to your store and how you get your products out to other markets. So we have some serious policies around small business and supporting them. We know that they employ almost half of Australians, and we want to make sure that they can either maintain it or grow it.
Thank you. I think we might now open up the floor. There are plenty more questions that have been supplied, and Mark and I could keep asking, but we know that there are lots of questions from the floor. Pete Faulkner, and if I can just remind you all, this is a chance for questions, not statements, and please, if you could introduce yourself. Not suggesting you were going to do that, Pete.
Thank you. I better start thinking of something else to say. Pete Faulkner, Conus Business Consultancy. I'm an economist. I also am an active board member in the region. You've both mentioned and acknowledged the importance of the reef to the economy up here. Everybody is, at least either directly or indirectly, reliant upon the health of the reef, which is why Advance Cairns in their federal election priorities highlighted the request to fully commit to funding the 25-year investment in the Reef 2050 long-term sustainability plan. Now, I'm not going to ask you individually to commit to that degree of investment, but what I will ask is, will you both commit to advocate for that funding to fully fund the Reef 2050 plan within your respective party rooms?
Yes. And yes, of course. I mean, the reef is the reason that all of us are here. Like, it really is. So, you know, the long-term health of it, the long-term sustainability of our entire region depends on it. So yeah, absolutely, 100%. And the thing that, you know, it's not just Cairns. If Cairns struggles because of the reef is in trouble, the knock-on effect the rest of the way up the Cape to the Torres Strait, it's a whole of Leichhardt problem, it's a whole of Townsville problem, it's an Australia problem. People come to Australia for three things: Uluru, Sydney Opera House, the Great Barrier Reef. If you take 1/3 of that away, Queensland is in some very, very serious trouble.
Jeremy.
I will always advocate for the reef.
Yes, I'll be fighting very hard for the reef. You know, we have some amazing tourist operators here that use it quite heavily. They have a number of staff that they use locally, whether they're dive instructors. They also take out a lot of our science researchers. So we need to make sure that we could support our tourist operators so we could take it forward. Towards the plan that you're asking about, I'm very supportive of having a long-term plan, and I'll be working a bit more on that.
Do we have any? James, if we can, thank you. Again, if you can introduce yourself, please. Thank you.
Thank you, James Mort from Myhaven. We're a construction and training school, and we run student accommodation and specialist disability housing. To you both, thank you for standing, and thank you both for your passion. Question for both of you: what is at your disposal to make sure Leichhardt does not become a backwater in that big house in Canberra? Because we've had a warhorse working for us who's well respected and has earned his stripes. How are you going to do it?
Yeah, well, obviously Warren's done so well over all that time based off the relationships he's built. And, you know, you look back at the 15 years of ambulance, and it's always been relationships we have to build, not just amongst your own staff within the same department, but into hospitals, into local governments, into disaster management groups, into fire and rescue, into police. And the last, I don't know, probably 6 months I've been working closely with Warren, and he is putting me in front of all these people and giving us good time to build good relationships so that when we do have issues up here, that we are front and centre for those decisions to be made.
People tend to notice when I walk into a room. Probably the easiest answer. But the reality is, look around at the visitation that we've had since I became a candidate up here. Anthony Albanese has come through 4 times to illustrate how important the Far North is. Richard Miles has been here twice. He flew out this morning. Tanya Plibersek has been here 3 times. Jim Chalmers will be here again before the election. He was up here a few weeks ago. The Labor government takes care of Leichhardt. It sees Leichhardt as an integral part of Australia's future, not just from tourism, but in terms of defence, in terms of the pivot into the South Pacific, in terms of our relationship with Asia. The future of Australia, a large chunk of it is going to be up here, and I'm really, really excited to have the opportunity to be a part of that with everyone else here, because we have a great story to tell, we have some great products, and we've got some really great people, and that's some of our biggest strengths.
Scott. Sorry, then we'll come to you. Any from this side of the room? You're being very quiet. Thank you.
Scott Davis. I'm the chair of Couch, but I'm also the executive director of the Australian Tropical Academic Health Centre, a health research translation centre in the region. My question relates to health, the largest industry in this part of the world. We all know that our clinical workforce is critical for the future of this town. And we're looking to see, and I'm interested to understand what your investment agenda, particularly in the research space, to actually close the gap between our primary healthcare and the acute clinical services that we offer in this region. Because there is still a gap between both those systems. One's a federal system and one's a state system. What is your commitment to actually driving collaboration to close that gap for our most disadvantaged populations in this region?
So, Jeremy, I think you finished there.
Yeah, thanks for that one, Scott. Obviously, you know my health background, and everything in health is evidence-driven. So we need to understand that when a study comes out, there may be a better way around the corner. And we need to acknowledge that and then build it into our practices. We know that we have the lowest life expectancy amongst pretty much all of Australia in Kennedy and Leichhardt, and we need to keep working on that. I believe that it's not just the GPs that we're going to put out with our new plan that we had today, or the allied health that are going to come from CQU. It's a whole of health solution. So when we work through our primary healthcare, that reduces that burden on that tertiary healthcare from the states, and they can get back to clearing those backlogs that are built up over 10 years of labour and making sure that people be happy and healthy in Far North Queensland.
Matt.
I heard primary health and preventative health care described once as the fence at the top of the cliff so that you don't need an ambulance at the bottom of it. The investment in CQ University and then the partnership with Queensland X-Ray is a demonstration of the commitment to improving the healthcare outcomes for people of the Far North. We know that when people are trained locally, they stay locally, and CQU is an important part of that. So is JCU with the 20 additional CSP places and their opportunity to get more. TAFE also plays a major role in this in the training of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health workers. People want, particularly in the discrete communities in the Torres Strait, to be able to have those communications around health in a culturally appropriate and specific way. Women will speak to women only, men will speak to men only. And that's why the fee-free TAFE, particularly in that health worker space, is going to be very important for improving a lot of those outcomes and closing the gap, particularly on the Cape. I also know that Lena Singh from the Chiz has some very, very big ideas around an intellectual hub that she's thinking about trying to get going with her university hospital to bring the best and the brightest in from Asia and the South Pacific to Cairns to have a look more broadly about what we're doing here in terms of tropical health. You know, with the climate changing, there is going to be more stranger diseases. We've already seen what happens when a pandemic that we don't necessarily expect gets out of the box. We are going to be able to be the hub and the centre of the known universe in that kind of study because we're going to have the access to a great airport, we've got access to a great lifestyle, and we're going to have access to the best and brightest from around the region.
Thank you. I will come to that question. There was just one question that specifically was directed to you that we received, and that was, and you reminded me when you opened and you referenced crime as one of your key platforms. But what does a federal politician have to do to impact crime? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's obviously two areas of crime we have. We have that international crime where people are smuggling in goods and weapons and people. Obviously, the one that's really affecting us in Cairns is that youth crime. People are breaking into houses, they're stealing the cars.
But what difference can a federal politician make?
So what we know that when these kids are breaking into houses, they are taking selfies of you while you're sleeping. They are live streaming their joyrides. So we could put that weight back onto the social media giants like Meta and TikTok and the usual. They've got these algorithms already in place. They know that what's happening in these videos without actually seeing them, and they could take the whole account down. So you take out that sensation of having this joyride where everyone's watching it, and you'll start to see that reduction. And that'll obviously support the adult crime, adult time that the state's been working through their, I think, second version's coming up very shortly, and that's how we're going to sort it out.
Thank you. Sorry, you've been very patient.
Oh, no, that's okay. Hi, Jeremy. Hi, Matt.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, sorry. My name is Elida Faith. I work for the Community and Public Sector Union here in Cairns, in the Far North Queensland, I should say. So my question is around public servants. I'm in workplaces all the time. Can you please tell me, Jeremy, how cutting 1 in 5 public service jobs aligns with your plan on trying to reduce the cost of living or address the cost of living crisis in Cairns? And how can you ensure that natural attrition is not going to undermine services up here. And you've just talked about drug smuggling and international crime, right? By cutting these public services or jobs in the public service, we're undermining biosecurity, our national security. And
Thank you,
I have
Jeremy.
to fill these questions every day when I go into the workforce, pretty much.
Yeah, well, we've been very open that we will not be cutting frontline public service jobs. The jobs that we're talking about are the extra 41,000 that have been created in Canberra, and we've actually seen that the output from the public sector has gone down since we've added these extra 41,000.
Can I just, sorry, on that, just to fact check that, didn't we understand that that had been walked back and that it's about a third of public servants in Canberra at that number? We've been required to fact check as we go through too.
No, the numbers that we've still got are the 41,000. We will be focusing on natural attrition to take these people out. There'll be no forced redundancies and there'll be no cuts to the frontline staff.
That's right. Sorry, I think I recall now that the policy has extended the time over which that natural attrition will occur and therefore the budget savings, if I'm right, yeah. Other questions? Thank you.
Hello, my name's Bronwyn. I'm the director of the Cairns and Far North Environment Centre, aka CAFNEC. I also have a question about collaboration. Obviously, anybody who lives in regional Australia knows how important collaboration is to getting things done. And here in Far North Queensland, our industries like tourism, as you've identified, but also agriculture and fisheries, depend on a healthy environment for jobs, food, and water security and economic stability. So when environmental challenges arise, whether it's natural disasters, resource management, or the impacts of climate change, we know that businesses, community groups, and government need to work together to solve these issues and find practical solutions. So as a representative for Leichhardt, how will you foster collaboration across these groups to ensure we can protect our environment while also supporting a strong regional economy?
That was Matt first, yes.
So I guess there's a couple of parts of that. Part of it is supporting, if we'll start with the agricultural industry, giving them opportunities to have environmentally sustainable ways of growing food, crops, particularly sugar, which is obviously a big part of it here. Now, one of the initiatives that was put forward by Michelle Rowland was a digital mapping of sorts of a cane farm. And basically the way that works is that it makes sure your cane farm is completely flat. They use the same sort of thing on the MCG. What that does is that when you fertilise and the water runs off, the fertiliser gets taken by the cane. If there is a divot, fertiliser gets in the divot, cane dies, water hits it, fertiliser hits the reef. That's a big problem for the reef. So this is a part of creating a solution that also increases the yield for the sugarcane farmers while giving us positive outcomes for the environment. The other part is the revegetation of creeks. You would think that maybe if you revegetate a creek, then perhaps they lose a bit of land to actually build the cane on. It's actually the reverse is true. When you revegetate around creeks, vermin becomes less. I couldn't tell you the science behind it, but yep, less vermin. So that too gives a greater yield while creating a better outcome for both the farmer and the environment. NEMA plays an essential role in the ongoing future of coordinating disasters. And it is unfortunate that the LNP has not committed to retaining all of NEMA. But when disaster hits, NEMA is where we need to look to, because they will be able to bring everyone together and make sure that the response is appropriate, that the response is whole of area. So it's not just building back infrastructure, it's looking after the mental health of people who are impacted by these disasters. Mayor Scomazon, I know that a lot of people in Mossman struggled after the floods, not necessarily from the impact of their houses, but from that feeling of isolation and being cut off. That needs to be a part of the response.
We might. Thank you. Thanks, Matt. And Jeremy, perhaps also giving you an opportunity to fact check that comment about NEMA in your answer too.
Well, you know, I've got a postgrad in disaster management, so I'm very, very supportive of making sure that we get, you know, that preparation, mitigation, response, recovery across that line. I don't believe those facts are quite correct. But coming back to your question around collaboration was the key part behind it. So you look at organisations like RRC, which came from Warren Ench here, and the work that they do around that agronomy, around the reef. And it's making sure that they can bring in all these different organisations to work together. We've also got great organisations like Advanced Cairns, Chamber of Commerce that bring groups together. You'll notice that in their federal ask there are quite a lot around the environment and resilience in there. So it's fostering those organisations, the RRC, Advanced Cairns, Chamber of Commerce, and making sure that we can take that forward into the future. We've made some really good steps, but there's a lot of work to be done still.
I'm going to jump back in here with a question from the audience. Airport, port and roads. We haven't talked about any of those yet. We're a big region. We're a long way from a lot of our source markets. It's a long way to get our product out there. What are the commitments that you're going to make as member for Leichhardt? Jeremy, starting with you, and then to Matt, to our airport, to our ports and to our roads, including significant bridges and flood mitigation, to ensure that this region has the trunk infrastructure that it needs to thrive over the next decade?
Yeah, we obviously have committed to the over $7 billion towards the Bruce Highway, and we plan to use local Tier 2 operators that aren't beholden to the CFMEU to make sure that money stretches further. We're estimating we'll get 30% extra work out of the money by organising with that. I sat down with Richard at the airport the other day. We had a good chat, not just about our international connections, but how we can grow our domestic connections and our general aviation and our small routes out to our regional towns, and that works hand in hand with what you do and the advocacy that you have. When you talk about announcements for things such as the Corinda Range, when we're dumping piles and piles of money into it without actually having a dollar figure to me, I do question where the latest Labor announcement on the Corinda Range came from, because no one put a dollar figure in front of me, and that would have been the first thing you would be doing, is going to all candidates. So I think that's one's just been plucked out of the air.
That was the state government. The federal government is committed to $245 million for the bridge. So, look, obviously we've made the $7.2 billion for the Bruce Highway, which is an incredible investment in the main artery of Queensland, not just the far north. And to build that back better, we understand, and we've always understood, that when the Bruce Highway cuts off, the far north suffers. So also there's been a commitment to complete the Kennedy Development Road, to give that second artery to get through, because there are going to be occasions, regardless of what we want to do, where things get a bit hairy. The change in the weather is guaranteeing that. Cairns has a very unique space. You know, we are the gateway to the Cape. We've got a large population there unto ourselves. So the port, the airlines, even the rail becomes critically important to us in the movement of freight. Now, I know that both the rail industry and the maritime industry are very keen on getting the ability to start moving freight and things of that nature and get it off our roads to create a stronger roads, roads with less traffic on them, roads that will last longer. So that's an exciting development that will need to be fleshed out with both the state and federal government. In terms of further commitments, obviously we're not making them today, but you know, I'm heading up to Weipa tomorrow, and you know, I'm sure the PDR will come up, and that will be something that we need to discuss, because the PDR is going to be critical in opening up the Cape to economic diversification and getting those communities really, really humming. It's also very important for defence moving forward as well.
So you touched on defence. If I may just follow on from that, thank you. Again, we had the Deputy Prime Minister, Defence Minister here recently at an event talking about the region's role in defence in an increasingly volatile and unstable geopolitical environment. We just looked overnight at the Russia's interest in Indonesia, so shall we say, just the extent to which that actually is real, is contested. However, everyone is focusing on this region. Tell us how you think about defence and the role that the region plays, a region that the Defence Minister described as a national asset for Australia. So Matt, sticking with you, and then Jeremy, coming back to you.
There's multiple prongs to this. The Defence Department largely will do what the Defence Department needs to do based on the intelligence that they have, which unfortunately, I'm not exactly privy to. But it also includes things like strengthening border force. You know, we have in Leichhardt the only international border. Saibai is very, very close, and we know that that border can be porous. We know that the agreement allows people to move back and forward freely for medical care, trade, things of that nature, and that has proven challenging. So one thing we can't do is cut public servants who are supporting Border Force in making sure that that area remains safe. In terms of the future, you know, there's already great work being done at our common user facility around keeping our boats on the water and keeping South Pacific boats on the water, which is going to be critical for the larger defence of the region. And being able to service the South Pacific fleet here in Cairns further strengthens our ties to the region, so we don't have scenarios where the Solomon Islands feel like a Chinese military base is a good idea. If they believe that they can trust and understand that Australia is here for them, and we have an incredible advantage up here because of our proximity and our relationship and our population to the South Pacific Islands, to be that, I guess, lighthouse in the region that the whole area can look to and go, yes, these are our friends.
Thank you. Jeremy.
Well, Virgin Australia is not part of our Air Force and shouldn't be telling us that the Chinese are sending missiles off in the Tasman Sea. When you look locally back here,
I think that's contested as well, but yes.
Well, we've got a Prime Minister that came out and said that he heard this from Virgin Australia pilots. We've already committed to our Air Force and we would love to have another squadron of fighter jets here in Cairns. But when you look locally...
Fighter jets?
Sorry, not fighter jets in Cairns, fighter jets in Australia, my mistake.
Sorry, that was
they won't be here.
checking, yeah.
So when you look locally around defence, I think we need to look hyper-local at 51st Battalion. So that model that they use is a great model where we get locals on the ground. We need to be recruiting more locals on the Cape. Just the other day when I was up at the islands, one of the gentlemen I was talking to said he found a Romanian walking around on Masig Island. So locals obviously know who's meant to be there, who's not meant to be there. We need to give them that framework of 51st Battalion or something similar to make sure that we could defend our region.
Thank you. And you had a question from the audience. Yes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nick Samoilov. I work at Conjointly. It's a market research company. I have two very short questions. The first one is, how do you assess the work of the Australian E-Safety Commissioner? And the second one, what are your thoughts on the ban on social media for children?
So, Jeremy, you finished that question.
Yep. So e-safety is huge. I've got 3 young boys. 2 of them are on social media, and it is concerning. I think the big thing is it needs to be parent-led. So parents need to have the access to these. Instagram has these tools where we could see the conversations that the older teen boys are using. And when you talk about these bans for under 16s, I believe it is, I am supportive of those bans. It's going to be a very difficult road for us to roll this out, but we have got the technology there through AI and all the works that we should be able to get across the line.
My 15-year-old was livid when that policy was brought forward and refused to speak to me for a couple of days. But it really is ultimately about her safety. The proliferation of disinformation, the manosphere is very, very toxic to young people and particularly young girls. Now, the E-Safety Commissioner has a big job. The internet is a moving feast. No one has yet finished the internet, so wherever something gets found, it gets shut down, it pops up somewhere else. So it's a bit like whack-a-mole in that specific thing, but you've got to do your best. In terms of the 16-year-old, I guess, ban, people are going to find their way around it, but it creates a guideline. You've got to be 18 to drink alcohol. We know that there are 16-year-olds out there drinking alcohol right now, but there's a guideline for parents to be able to go, no, this is when it is appropriate for you to get into this world. And then it's up to the parents to speak to their children to make sure that they're safe online, find ways to help mitigate some of the toxicity and frankly dangerous ideas that can be out there.
Thank you. And I think we have a question here from Nick. Sorry.
Hi,
Jen. Sorry.
Jen Spilsbury from the Couch Cancer Centre. I asked a question of the candidates at the Chamber of Commerce luncheon, so forgive me for being annoying, but as a former newspaper editor, I'm used to that. Both parties asked for a business case for the future of the Couch Wellness Centre. You've both got that now. My question is, will you support the centre? in their quest for $7.5 million over 5 years, talking about growth in Mount Peter, etc. Cancer is in our community. What will you do to help Couch?
Couch is an incredible part of what makes Cairns Cairns, and has been for many, many years. As I said before, both Pip and Charlie I have known through basketball, and this was their dream and their baby, and it is an incredibly important and unique part of Cairns. We do have that business case. We remain in discussions with the Department of Health and Mark Butler, and I do owe you a phone call from yesterday, Jen, but we'll get to that one. I don't have an announcement for you today, and I'm sorry, but I will be continuing to work for this because I know the good work that Couch has done over the years. I've known people who've used the service, and obviously, you know, Pip and Charlie played a very big part of my life when I first came up here, and I would really like to honour them.
Jeremy.
You have my utmost personal support. I'm fighting hard. We've got your business case. I've got it in front of Van Ruston, the Shadow Health Minister, and Warren is still fighting very hard as well, and we're sort of being a united front. The work that you do is very important. I do remember once I was dispatched to a gentleman outside the 24-hour medical who was diagnosed in one of these 6-minute Medicare appointments with cancer, and he was standing at the front door and he rang an ambulance because he didn't know what to do. What do I do next? And the services that Couch provide is what gets you through there into that Liz Plummer and then on past Liz Plummer as well. So it is a very important service and I'm fighting very hard for it.
Thank you. Nick.
Nick Tromp, Chair of Advance Cairns. Matt, you briefly touched on the CUF before, and this is a question to both of you. It's a jointly funded project, common user facility, to be built down on our port. The single most transformative piece of infrastructure since the airport was built, arguably, the international airport. At this stage, it's become evident that the expenditure to build the CUF is probably more than double than the $387 million that is committed. And whilst there are no figures in the public domain, it's clearly going to be a joint funded, no further figures for extra money, it's clearly going to be a jointly funded state and federal project. So from both of you, I'd like to know whether you philosophically will advocate within your parties for extra funding to ensure that the CUF is delivered.
You or me?
Jeremy finished, yes, so Jeremy.
Hey, Brooks.
We are very, very supportive of the CUF. We obviously need to make sure that we get our dollar figure back that we need to do to get it through. I've taken Angus Taylor down there. That was my commitment, was to get him in front of it. He's obviously, hopefully going to be the money man in 17 days' time. And he went through with Tropical Reef Shipyard and talked with the boys and the girls down there about what they imagine and what they want. They're obviously very cautious. There's been a few Navy boats that have been cancelled orders for, but they are booked out for ages. You talk to the reef operators, they can't get their boats in at the moment, so there's a huge appetite for this, and I'll be fighting very hard.
Matt.
It really is, as you say, Nick, a transformative proposition. Already that shipyard is pulling in $250 million per year, which didn't lose a single day of work over COVID, which is just incredible. And to be frank, probably played a large part in propping up our economy, and I thank those guys for that. There's been a $180 million investment already from the federal government to support this project because it is so important. But until we get that dollar figure back from the state government, it is kind of in that nowhere land. But I can assure everybody here that I understand how important this facility is. I love this facility. I think that any opportunity people have to bring more diversification to our economy is fantastic, and I will work very, very hard to see this come through.
Thank you. While you're looking and thinking about other questions, I want to maybe... good, sorry, you've got the microphone back. Good, that was quite fun, wasn't it? But I will just ask one question of both of you that's taking a step back and thinking about, sorry Mark, the fact that you've both put yourselves forward, and you know, we have enormous respect for people who are prepared to put themselves under public scrutiny. This is the first campaign for both of you at this level. What have been some of the highs and what have been some of the lows? And so Matt, we'll go first back to you to start that.
I think one of the highs was actually this week. You know, making announcements is great, meeting people is great, you know, being able to help deliver the Dharma was great, but I was door knocking in a retirement home. And the old bloke invited us in. The old ones tend to invite us in to have a bit of a chat, and I sat with him. And I got ready to get into the spiel, and I noticed some sympathy cards up, and he informed us that his wife of 72 years had passed late last week. And it changed the complexion of what we were doing. This was no longer Matt the politician, or it was just me and Les, and we sat together for an hour and a half, and he told me about his wife and his life and his children and his grandchildren and how sad he was, and that, you know, she did the cooking and I looked after her outside, and now I don't know what to do. But it was an opportunity to remind me, because this can be all-consuming, it's a lot of work, why we're actually doing this. And for an hour and a half that I spent with that man was the best hour and a half of my week by a significant margin, because I was able to reach out to another human being who needed just a person to sit with him, tap him on the shoulder and tell him it was going to be okay.
We might stick with the highs and then come back for the lows. Jeremy, highs.
I think the highs for me have been meeting those everyday heroes out there. It's the sporting clubs that have those great secretaries that have these grand visions for their footy fields. I went 2 days ago with Ken up to Skyrail and the visions they have going forward for those things. And I think that's been a huge high about how much optimism there is for Cairns and how much more we could do.
And the lows. It's not easy being in the public.
No, it's not
eye.
easy. I think the hardest thing for me is I've gone from the most trusted profession where everyone just opens the door and lets me walk in and they'll tell me their deepest, darkest secrets, to automatically, I think 30% of people just don't like the colour you're wearing. So it's been a big change for me for that one.
Matt.
I know this is going to sound strange from a 7-foot man, but the lack of anonymity, that was quite jarring at the start when, I put my hand up and was all good. But when the signs came out, people stopped a bit more often when I was walking the dogs.
Hey, we haven't talked enough about cost of living. It is a really big issue for a community as diverse as this one. The pressures don't stop when the election stops, when the policies roll out, starting with you, Matt, and then into Jeremy. Particularly, we're concerned about our communities in the Torres Strait, in the Cape, and our neighbours in Kennedy, in the Gulf, with the rising cost of energy, the rising cost of insurance, and the rising cost of everyday goods. What's your plan? What is your approach over this period, if you're elected, in addressing the cost of living specifically for Leichhardt residents?
So a lot of the national policies that have been announced actually work and dovetail very well into Leichhardt. So if we take Fee Free TAFE as the first example, what that does is provides people with the opportunity to upskill themselves and get better jobs. That is a cost of living relief straight away. The renewable energies, the solar panels into the batteries, is a cost of living relief. Cheaper batteries, but if enough people take up the batteries, that reduces the demand and the pressure onto our electricity supplies and therefore brings down the price of electricity. It's the whole supply and demand thing again. The other thing is, obviously the cost of living investments that have gone in, the $150 energy rebates, the tax cuts for every single Australian. If you average an income of $60,000 a year, you currently have a tax cut already legislated that gets you an extra $1,700 a year in your pocket. The first round of next tax cuts will take that up to $2,000 a year, and it will get to, in the next 3 years, $2,500 a year. Now, if you're on $60,000 per year, an extra $2,500 in your pocket that's not being taxed is $50 a week. At $50 a week at that wage, that can sometimes be the difference between the kid's birthday party and no kid's birthday party. That is an ongoing cost of living relief measure that will last forever. Won't be taken away. It will be there in 5 years. It'll be there in 10 years. In 10 years, that'll be worth $25,000. There's your deposit with your 5% for your house. And that's just in tax savings alone. No one's pretending that the last few years have been easy. They've been very, very difficult. But we've had to fight to get through. It's been difficult everywhere.
Okay.
It doesn't make it easy.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy.
So we have our national cost of living policies, the 25 cents a litre off your fuel. It's for you and for the delivery drivers and the truckies. We've got an energy policy to drive down the cost of energy, and we've got some great housing policies and some great tax policies as well. But when you look more local, I was in Weeper not that long ago, and there was a post on Facebook. A mum was looking for baby formulas, none at Woolies, and she was struggling to find some, and she was waiting for the Qantas jet to bring it up. So after that, I went and met with C-Swift, and I said, what's happening? Like, what's causing this cost rise? What's causing these delays? And it was really good to sit down with them and work through their business and find out what their pinch points are. You know, the facilities they have to work with up there, their ageing fleet, just, you know, how they have to get the stuff on and off these barges that are 30 years old. And I said to them, well, you know, let's anticipate that I get up and that Peter Dutton gets up and said, can you work on some sort of plan that how I can help you to deliver these better services to Far North, deliver these services to Far North Queensland, so we can, you know, modernise their fleet as a private business, but also we could create better public facilities for them and barge areas up in the islands.
Thank you. And we have a question from Mayor Lisa Scomazon from Douglas Shire.
Yes, Lisa Scomazon, Mayor Douglas Shire. So, as you're both probably aware at the moment, local government and the LGAQ have got a campaign, Don't Leave Us in the 70s. So what I'd like to know, you know, cost of living just doesn't affect all of us in the room, it also affects local government. So currently we receive less than 0.5% of every $100 that are in taxes in Australia, and all we want is to bring that up to 1%. So what are your views on that? And one of the things we have to understand is that unsustainable councils are an unsustainable community. So how are you going to help us doing that? Thank you.
Jeremy.
That's a really good question, Lisa, and unfortunately that grant system has the acronym calling FAGs. And at 0.5% or at 1%, it's based off population. It doesn't recognise that you get 3 metres of rain and the culverts next to your road need to be huge. It doesn't recognise that the Cookshire has 6,000 people and 3,000 kilometres of roads they have to maintain. So we obviously aren't going to be moving back to the 1% if we're in, but we want to move to a model that reflects the individuality of councils and make sure that we could put the money where it's needed.
Matt.
Thank you, Lisa. Having worked in the local government area for both Cairns and the Tablelands Council, I understand particularly the challenges that small councils can run into, particularly with rates base. You wouldn't be doing your job if you weren't sitting here asking for the extra 0.5% to get yourself to that 1%. It is imperative that councils continue to put pressure on the people who can make those decisions. I can't make that decision today, but I do really, truly understand what you're going through. There have been a lot of opportunities through grants, but then I know that grants are difficult for small councils because if you compare yourself, say, to Gold Coast, where they've got a cast of thousands and a team of 27 grant writers versus, you know, places like Cookshire, for example, who can't have a grant writer, and that puts you at a distinct disadvantage. So I think there's opportunities to colour in around the edges to make, you know, some of these grant stuff a bit more equitable, to get the funding that is required to make these smaller councils and even the larger councils up here sustainable moving forward, because the councils deliver so much.
Thank you. Sorry, we're getting close to time. We have one question over here in the corner from Gareth.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's Gareth Phillips from the Marine Tourism Peak Body. Thanks to Matt and Jeremy. I know I've also been a bit of an annoyance, and thanks for listening to what we're saying. It's a slightly different question to the stuff I've been talking to you over the last few weeks, but it's follow on from your C-Swift conversation and fuel. Very appreciative of the 25 cents on on road users. But both sides of the party commit to maintaining the fuel tax credit scheme that is really important for non-road users, because the excise tax is about supporting road development and infrastructure.
And your question?
Is, are you committing to maintaining that and not giving in to minor parties who are looking to remove that?
Yes, we will maintain that. It is critical to your fleet. It is critical to all of the fleets, so it will be maintained.
Yes, Gareth.
There we go. We have bipartisan support.
Are we finishing on agreement?
Yes. No, I do have one more question, though. It is quite extraordinary that we've had a whole discussion around federal politics and we haven't mentioned the T word. In a Trump New World Order, how would each of you think about how you inform your Canberra colleagues, should you be successful and be the next member? How do you think about that engagement with Washington? We've talked about defence, we talk about agricultural exports here. Jeremy, you're first.
Yeah, I think we've had very, very positive relationships with America. USA. For many, many years, we've had many presidents come and go, had many prime ministers come and go, and I think the cultures that bring us together are quite strong. And we do have ups and downs, but I believe we could push through that. And making sure that our industries such as beef and we've got the aluminium or the bauxite up at Weipa, and making sure that they remain in that free trade agreement that we've already negotiated as the Liberal National Government.
Thank you. And Matt?
Yeah, the world's changed. And I think that the engagement has to reflect that. The tariffs that were implemented upon Australia and the rest of the world, including the penguins, was not as Anthony Albanese said, not the actions of a friend. So we need to be, we still need to engage with America. They are still our closest ally and have been since the Second World War. Jeremy's right. One president doesn't make a country. It doesn't make the United States. And I'm sure we all know Americans ourselves who are beautiful and generous people. And as a majority of them are beautiful and generous people. Remember the good, deal with the bad, and we'll get through it.
See, I still try to not end on agreement, but here we go. But look, please, can you, before we turn over to Mark to wrap up, can you please thank Jeremy and Matt for putting themselves forward today?
Thank you all so much for your attendance today. Thank you both to Jeremy and to Matt for putting your heads forward and to being here today. We learnt a lot more about you today. I think a lot of people in the room came in to learn more about you as people. I love to hear the stories of your optimism. You reminded us what's really important. Both of you brought a tear to the eye at one point. You made us smile hearing about your door-knocking stories. And we know that on the 22nd, pre-polling begins. So the race is really on. We were pleased to hear that the energy you will bring from the campaign, you'll bring into the first 100 days. I'm pleased you're getting a jacket, Matt. That's important. Make sure you get that in your first 100 days. But the more important thing is there are issues that are being resolved with the policy announcements that we've heard, and thank you for the work that it takes to get those over the line. But there's still a lot of issues for this region that will need advocacy ongoing. It was great to hear more about you both, and the approach that you're going to take to looking after Leichhardt from Saibai all the way to Edmonton and up to the boundaries of Kennedy. Please join me in thanking my co-host and the amazing Jacinta Redden and Chairman Nick Tromp for welcoming us today. Please join me in thanking Advance Cairns, our candidates, and all the candidates who are running for the seat of Leichhardt. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful afternoon and we'll see you soon.